Hi, this PowerPoint covers Higher Human Biology Unit 3, Key Area 1, but it's just the first bit of Key Area 1. So it's just the divisions of the nervous system. A later PowerPoint will cover the neural pathways. Okay, now if you are watching this, you've probably been directed to this video from a link in the online learning that was given to you by your school. In Key Area 1, what we're trying to do is learn about the differences in structure and function of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system is pretty simple to understand. Peripheral nervous system has got lots of little parts. And this video is about looking at that. So we want to know about the somatic nervous system. We want to know about the autonomic nervous system. And then there's also inside the autonomic, we've also got the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems. And that's what we're looking at in this video here. Here are the SQA course support notes, so feel free to pause this, have a little look. This is basically the notes that are given to teachers to say this is what the pupils need to know, okay, and need to understand. So I'll be going into this into a bit greater detail to help with our understanding. Right, a lot of you will have done National 5 Biology, and this part of the Higher Human Biology course builds on Unit 2, Key Area 2 of National 5, Control and Communication. If you remember, you looked at the nervous system and also the endocrine system, but we're only focusing on the nervous system just now. Right, you should be confident coming into this part of the course, you should already be confident that the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. You should be aware that there are 3 types of neurons. Remember, a neuron is another word for a nerve cell. We've got sensory, inter, and motor. Now, the sensory neuron, remember, passes information to the central nervous system. Okay, so the sensory neuron is attached to a receptor. So maybe if it's your skin or your eyes or something, they detect a change in the environment. Impulse will travel along your sensory neuron to the central nervous system. And it might go up to your brain, or it might travel via interneuron, which basically just allows the body to react much quicker. It's part of the reflex arc. Allows the body to react much quicker because it just takes the information and then sends it straight to the motor neuron, rather than going up to your brain and having to decide, oh, this is really hot, I'm going to drop it. If you're in pain, it just does it. It's a way of responding quicker to your environment. So that's the reflex arc. And then your last type of neuron is your motor neuron, and that was the one that enables a response to occur. So it will take a message from the central nervous system or the interneuron and send that message to an effector cell, which will be your muscle cells or a gland, and that's basically going to be part of the body that carries out the response to whatever the stimulus was that the sensory neuron got the message from, or was stimulated the message from. Our effectors will carry out that response. So it might be to duck if a ball's coming towards you, or it might be the release of a hormone triggered by the presence of another hormone. Right, so in Higher Human Biology, we are going to look at the difference between the central nervous system and something called the peripheral nervous system, which you might have come across at National 5. Now this picture on the right here, it's pretty gruesome. It's from a real dissection, a human dissection, and it is the whole nervous system that they've managed to isolate. So the central nervous system, as I said, is the brain and the spinal cord, which can contain the interneurons, and I've just highlighted that in yellow. Okay. Now the peripheral nervous system is made up of basically any neuron outside of the central nervous system. So I've sort of highlighted it here in red. So basically, central nervous system is brain and spinal cord. Be careful not to say spine. Spine is actually part of the skeletal system. The spinal cord is what runs down the spine. So be careful when you answer questions like that in exams. And then the peripheral nervous system, as I said, is basically any nerve not in the central nervous system. We're going to just focus on the peripheral nervous system. Okay. Right. So the peripheral nervous system can actually be split up further. There are two systems that contribute to the peripheral nervous system. We've got the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. So the somatic nervous system is responsible for conscious, voluntary movements by skeletal muscles. So these are the things that you might think about doing, like running, or maybe you might actively think about moving this lip gloss over here, something like that. It's all about skeletal muscles. So movement. Your autonomic nervous system is about involuntary unconscious responses, often linked with homeostasis, so breathing, heart rate, those sorts of things. Quite often you'll see somatic nervous system abbreviated to SNS, and you'll see the autonomic nervous system abbreviated to ANS. And of course, sorry, should I go back? It should have gone back there. The central nervous system, abbreviated to CNS. Peripheral nervous system, abbreviated to PNS. Okay, so that's 4 abbreviations, all sounding very similar. So you'll need to try and take a bit of time to get those in your head. Right, now if that's not complicated enough, we're going to split this up even further, okay? We're going to look at the autonomic nervous system, which is in itself made up of 2 more systems, okay? And these 2 systems work together to balance out. We've got the sympathetic system, which is basically the system that prepares the body for action, for movement, to respond to things in a fast situation. It's sort of like your fight or flight responses. And then we also have the parasympathetic system, which is a system that's responsible more for resting. It's often called the digestion rest system. And basically the ANS, autonomic nervous system, is a balance between these 2 systems. Now if you look at this picture here, it's basically showing you how homeostasis is a balance between the 2 autonomic systems, a parasympathetic and parasympathetic. I'm just going to get a little pen, so I want to just point something out. So if we look at this side here, you've got a man running away from a snake. He's sensed danger, so his sympathetic system kicks in. He's got to move quickly and get out. He's running away. So what we can see here is on the red balance, the sympathetic side has risen higher. So basically it's saying that, you know, we're doing a lot more. And the parasympathetic side is down lower. Whereas on this side, we've got this resting. The parasympathetic side is sort of hanging more in the balance. So that one's being used to a greater extent than the sympathetic system. What you must be aware of is that, see, when you are in fight or flight and you're running away from something, it doesn't mean your parasympathetic system's not working, or it's only your sympathetic system that's on. It just means that the sympathetic system is being more powerful, it's being used more. And then when you're resting, the sympathetic system's still on, but to a much lesser extent, and the parasympathetic system is being more powerful and it's taking over. What we say is these 2 systems work antagonistically together. They basically carry out the opposite actions. So one is get up and go, and the other one is stop and relax. It's like a break. Okay, so they work together, but they do the opposites. So we've got a nice little flow chart showing the nervous system, the different branches. I just quite like it. You might want to pause here and take a picture of it, or if you've got the PowerPoint actual download, you might want to print this slide out. It's just showing the 2 branches of the nervous system. We've got our central one here, then it goes to your brain and your spinal cord, and it kind of explains what they're doing, what their roles are, and then you go to the other side with your peripheral nervous system, the different neurons that are part of that. We've got our motor, there we go, motor, sensory neuron, and then from the motor neuron we've got the 2 other systems, somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system, going further down, showing the division of the autonomic nervous system into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic system. As I said, this might be quite a nice diagram to print off for your notes. Right, let's go into further detail for the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems. We're going to first look at heart rate. Now, we have looked at this before in Higher Human. In Unit 2, Key Area 6, which is all about structure and function of the heart, you will have seen, in fact, you will have seen this exact diagram, if you were taught by me anyway. And it's basically showing how the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system work together to control heart rate. Now, from Unit 2, Key Area 6, you should already be confident that the sympathetic nerve impulses increase heart rate. So we've got our diagram of our brain up here, and the sympathetic nerve is the purple one. It goes down from the brain to the heart, and if there's an electrical impulse that travels down the sympathetic nerve, then it's going to increase the heart rate, okay? If we've got impulses traveling down the parasympathetic nerve, so this other one to the heart, it's actually going to result in a decrease in the heart rate. Now, in Key Area 6, Unit 2, you will have found out that the sympathetic nerve that runs from the brain to the heart is responsible for triggering the release of noradrenaline. That is the hormone that is responsible for increasing the heart rate. In Key Area 6, you will have been introduced to the acetylcholine, and that is the hormone that is triggered by the parasympathetic nerve, and this actually causes a decrease in the heart rate. Okay, so if your body needs your heart to pump faster, sympathetic nerve kicks into place, and that releases the noradrenaline, which causes an increase in heart rate. If we're now at a rest situation and we're not needing to move fast, we're not needing to, get lots of oxygen in our blood flowing around the body to respond to things, if we're just resting, the parasympathetic system plays a bigger role, and this means that we're releasing the hormone acetylcholine to reduce our heart rate. Okay. At all times, both these hormones are in our system, but if the sympathetic nerve is sort of taking control and being more powerful, there will be more noradrenaline. If the parasympathetic nerve is kicking into power and becoming a bit stronger, it's outweighing the sympathetic nerve, then we're going to be releasing more acetylcholine. Okay, so it's the balance of these hormones that dictate whether the heart rate is going fast or slow. So another example of the sympathetic and parasympathetic system working together to control something for homeostasis is our breathing rate. Okay, just like the heart rate, the sympathetic nerve impulses increase breathing rate and depth, and the parasympathetic nerve impulses decrease breathing rate and depth. So remember, we said that sympathetic was fight or flight. Basically, get ready to respond to something changing in the environment. Maybe it's stressful, maybe it's a predator, or maybe it's a situation that you don't know what to do. Your sympathetic nerves kick in, so heart rate increases, breathing rate increases. Now, when we say depth, it means that, like, how deep, like a big breath, or just like little shallow breaths, okay? So the sympathetic nervous system is all about trying to get as much oxygen and glucose to different parts of your body as quick as possible. So think about it. For fight or flight, we're wanting to move our muscles, we want to get away from a dangerous situation. So by increasing our heart rate and increasing our breathing rate, we are getting more oxygen into the blood and moving that blood around the body faster. This therefore gives the muscles the things it needs to allow them to work and allow our body to respond. And just like, as I said, the opposites are working antagonistically. The parasympathetic system is going to be slowing our heart rate down like we saw before, decreasing our breath rate and decreasing the depth of our breath. Because when you're at rest, we don't need as much oxygen in our body moving around as fast because our muscle cells are not working. Our muscles aren't needing to work and respond to things. We could just be either sleeping or just sitting content and relaxed. The other thing that will happen during, and you'll know this yourself, during fight or flight is changes happen in your digestive system. You will have been told, do not eat a big meal before you go do exercise. Okay? Because when you're doing exercise, maybe you're doing your sport or something, that's your sympathetic nervous system really being quite powerful. It's getting you going, your adrenaline's going up, you're running around and things. And you shouldn't eat your food because you'll get ill. They'll tell you have a sore stomach, and it is because your sympathetic nervous system, when it kicks into place, it will affect your digestive system. It's going to decrease your digestive system. It affects two things, your sympathetic and parasympathetic system. It affects peristalsis and intestinal secretions. Now, peristalsis is the contraction of muscles in the digestive system to move food along, or food that's waiting to be digested. So if you look at this diagram here, what peristalsis is it's contraction of the muscles behind a ball of food to push the ball of food down. So imagine this is a ball of food. So behind the ball of food, the muscles contract, and that pushes the food down. And whilst the muscles behind contract, the muscles in front are relaxed. So contract, pushes it along. That's peristalsis. Now, in the intestinal secretions, that's basically fluid that is released. It's little special molecules that are released from the intestines to help with digestion. Okay. Now, the parasympathetic nerve impulses, so that's the digest and rest, that's a slow down, puts the brakes on things. That actually increases the rate of peristalsis and increases intestinal secretions. The sympathetic, that's the fight or flight, the sympathetic nerve decreases peristalsis and intestinal secretions. And it all comes back to that bit of advice of the don't eat before you exercise. Because if you're in fight or flight, you want your muscles to be doing all your work. You want the blood to be taking the oxygen and the glucose to your muscles so they can undergo respiration, so they can start working. When you're resting and there's nothing to be stressed out about, you're not running away from anything, you're safe, that is when the digestive system takes over. That's when you need your parasympathetic system to be encouraging peristalsis and intestinal secretions in order to digest the food so that your body can continue to function. Okay, but that gets turned off during fight or flight because it's more important at that time to get the glucose and the oxygen to your muscles so that you can respond to any dangers. So just a wee summary of the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. A lot of it I've said already, but I'll just quickly summarise it all again. Sympathetic system is the one that works harder during times of stress or activity, fight or flight. It increases heart rate and breathing rate so that the body can obtain and transport more oxygen to muscle cells faster, so our body can react faster or stronger to whatever situation is occurring. At the same time, we decrease peristalsis and intestinal secretions, so decreasing digestion, so that blood can be actually diverted away from the digestive system to parts of the body that are actually required to respond to the situation. During parasympathetic system, well, not during it, but when that is basically working harder than the sympathetic system, that is during times of relaxation and rest. And by decreasing your heart rate and breathing rate, other parts of the body can begin to work harder. So this allows essential systems to do their jobs, like digestion. So at the same time, during relaxation and rest, we're going to increase things like peristalsis and intestinal secretions so that digestion can occur. Okay. This is a nice little diagram that kind of shows the opposites, how the parasympathetic system and the sympathetic system are working in opposites. If I were you, I would take a moment to pause and peruse this in your own time, but I'm just going to point out a few interesting ones. So the parasympathetic system, in terms of the eye, parasympathetic makes the pupil constricts, so gets smaller. Okay, whereas the sympathetic system, when that kicks in, the pupil dilates and gets bigger. Or if we look at urination, right? So parasympathetic system allows you to sort of go to the toilet and pee, but the sympathetic system actually inhibits urination. Now this makes sense. If you are stressed in a fight or flight situation, the last thing you want to do is stop and go to the toilet, okay? You want to get away from the danger. So that's why during the rest periods and our parasympathetic system is working a bit harder, that's when the body should be dealing with waste. Okay. Any other ones that are worth looking at? Not really. There's some interesting ones about reproduction as well. Parasympathetic division promotes basically erections and arousal. However, the sympathetic division promotes the ejaculation and vaginal contractions. So both play really important roles during reproduction. That brings us to the end of that little bit that's looking at the differences of structure and function in the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, because remember we're going to do neural pathways later. So by the end of this, you should be able to state components of the CNS and PNS, describe structure and function of somatic nervous system, structure and function of autonomic nervous system, and looking at the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems in regards to heart rate, breathing rate, and the digestive system. Well, I hope that helped. If you have any questions, pop them in the comments, or if you're on Teams because I'm at the same school as you, then just ask in the questions channel. Right, see you later. Bye.